underground, brother.
Hey everyone. Since you all liked my last story, I have another one about growing up in that house. This one is a little bit less straightforward and more of a sequence of scary instances before the death of my father. Not outright scary but more unnerving. I was 14 when my father was diagnosed with cancer. Being 14, I didn't truly understand what this meant for me and my family. Everyone was distraught and the happy house that we all had surrounding us turned into a calm yet sad environment. Like every day you would want the clock to stop so you had just a little more time. Things didn't get weird till closer to the end. It was a slow start that quickly turned the house sour. It all started one night after my father had a fall in the kitchen. He was pretty roughed up and laid down in his chair in the main floor, directly under the third-story loft that looked out onto the big living room in the center of the house adjacent to the kitchen. My mother was sleeping on the couch towards the other end of the living room. I was laying down in my bedroom at the top level, which was at the end of a small walkway that had my parents' room at the beginning, with the door leading out directly to the loft, and the computer room right next to mine. As I was laying there, almost ready to go to sleep, I hear a set of footsteps run across the loft into my parents' room. My father wakes up meows and boo. "What the hell are you doing?" he yells out in a weak voice. I get up out of bed and walk out of my room and down the short hallway to the edge of the loft and look down at him. "Nothing, I thought it was you," I replied. "Just quit messing around and go to bed," he said as he tucked away under a blanket. I stood there for a second trying to figure out what that was. Maybe it was oops, I say to myself, that cat is a little on the chunky side. As I was turning around to my left I looked into my parents' bedroom, and there it was. If I had blinked it would have been gone. A slender shadow, standing at the foot of my parents' bed, barely visible in the moonlight that was shining in. Just as quickly as I had seen it, a shadow from something outside had blocked all the light for a split second, and it was gone. Terrified, I ran to my room, locked my door and lay down on my bed, heart racing. After a couple hours of laying there I finally convinced myself I was seeing things, and managed to fall asleep, but little did I know that I would be seeing this thing on and off until this day. The next few months were filled with an overbearing aura of death. You could feel it in the air, sickly and dark. Things had been moving around. A lot of knocks and footsteps without a person there, and finally whispers in the dark. This was at the beginning of the end for my father, and would stay all the way up to when my mother was dying of cancer as well. It could be heard primarily in the basement, where we have a second living room, my brother's room, bathroom, and a wine room, so it's kind of its own little house of its own down there. And also where I would spend most of my time from 14 on, a good place to get away. One night my brother and I were just hanging out watching movies and playing games. He's starting to feel tired so he went to bed leaving me up alone. By this point things have been pretty bad around the house, so I would typically not like to stay up late. But I was really into that game I was playing so I ignored my better interest. A couple hours later, around 2:30 a.m. I was still gaming strong, but I could feel the air around growing colder, and couldn't ignore the sickly unnerving aura of the house anymore. I turn off the TV and get ready to go up to my room, but I hear a voice, one that's softer than a whisper, a light voice in the air that might be coming from far away, but isn't. It's all around you, it's quiet, soft, and cold. I stood there for a few moments listening to what I was hearing. I could almost make sense of it, but it was just out of range. But the only thing I do remember was the whisper of the word family. I was scared, and ran straight up to my room and locked the door. You could always hear the whispers in the dark, if you stayed up late enough, and paid close ear. The voices were there up until the day we sold the house. The end was the hardest. He was so sick. He had lived a year when he was only given 6 months. The house was now the death house to me. Everything from the smell, to the pressure and feeling of dread in every room, but we were at an end. One night I was laying in my bedroom watching something I don't remember. My parents were laying in their usual positions in the living room with a movie on. As I was laying there, starting to get tired, I heard a slight scratching sound coming from my wall that connects to my parents' closet. I think nothing of it at first. Maybe Mom's looking for something in there, I say to myself. After a few more minutes the slight scratches turned into hard slow ones. I can't take it anymore, so I get up to see what was going on. As I walk up towards their room I look over the loft and see them both in the living room watching their movie. "Hey! What's going on in your closet?" I ask my mother, who was looking up at me. "What do you mean?" My mother responds, tired and confused. "There has been a scratching sound coming from your closet for the last 10 minutes and I can't sleep because of it." I yell back a little angrier than I meant to come across as. "I'd meows and boo. Want me to check it out with you?" she responds. In the moment I remember that these things were happening to all of us, and she's tired and ready to ignore it all for a moment of peace with my father. "No, it's fine, I'll check it out myself. Good night, Mum," I say as I turn to open their door and check out their room. As the door opens and I step inside, I was overrun with the darkness of the room. It was calm, cold, and most uncharacteristically dark. There must have been no moon outside to shine in, because the whole room was pitch black. I try the light switch to see what's going on, but the light won't work. The scratching from their closet had now stopped, and the air remained calm and cold. I thought for a second I saw the slender shadow in the corner, but I couldn't make anything out, and that's when the room turned electric. It went from calm and cold to frantic and freezing, and I saw the shadow step forward. The hairs on my neck stood up. I didn't stay for 1 second longer before slamming the door shut behind me, running to my room. That thing had been waiting, and had been for a year. It was angry, and tired of waiting. My father passed away that week. The house never truly went quiet again, and I would have many talks with my family about the things going on. They all experienced them too. It became something we just ignored, and became normal. The more we ignored it, things would happen more in spurts instead of being constant. Voices calling out for me in the sound of my mother, shadows moving. Although when my mother got sick it was even worse than before. But I'll share that story another time. I'm 25F. I've been a caregiver for 6 years now. I've worked in a few different places, retrained and reintroduced to new residents. The first CBRF I ever worked for was a 13-bed facility. A CBRF takes in more than just geriatrics who can no longer live alone. It handles anywhere from addicts to dementia to old age. In order to become a DSP you have to go through about 4 weeks of training. Direct support professionals go through basic first aid, administering medications, basic fire safety and dementia support classes. All the training classes never quite prepare you for being on the floor. During dementia training, they taught us about dementia with Lewy bodies. It's a degenerative disease that causes auditory and visual hallucinations. We ran through different scenarios of how to redirect a resident while they are having these episodes. One example was of the residents chasing after their past loved ones. Often they wander away from the home and end up lost. We had to stay vigilant in order to keep them safe. The main thing was we were to never discredit them, or their hallucinations. We were taught to play along and redirect. Telling them, "No, it's made up," or "No one is there," can cause them to fly into a violent rage, or break down into inconsolable tears. When I first started on the floor, I met one of the first dementia patients right away. Her name was Beverly. My first interaction with her was her coming up behind me and whispering to me, "You better take care of them, or I'll have to kill ya." She then pointed at the floor as if someone was standing there. I nervously laughed and ran to my administrator's office. She explained to me that Beverly was harmless, but she often saw children. She reminded me of my training and to play along, but then added, "You may see them too." I continued working there for a few more months without much of any incident. I worked the second shift, so there were many uncomfortable nights. While vacuuming the hallways, I heard the door alarm go off. Every time someone opened one of the main doors to outside, an alarm would ring. I looked out the window to see Beverly, in nothing but a nightgown, in the middle of a Wisconsin winter. She was bent over at the waist, walking slowly, as if a small child was holding her hand and leading her down the parking lot. I quickly ran outside to catch up with her and tried to consult her. She was confused when she saw me, and asked where the little girl went. I explained to her that her mom came to pick her up, and quickly brought her back inside. A few weeks later, some of the other staff were talking between shift change, and I overheard them talking about Beverly's little girl. Turned out I wasn't the only one that had seen Beverly have an episode. But then they went on to talk about the daycare next door. I hadn't been working there for long, so one of the veteran DSPs went on to explain about the original daycare that used to be in the new one's place. I guess it burned down and some of the kids got hurt. The veteran DSP wondered if there was any correlation between what Beverly was seeing and the old daycare. The rest of the group of the DSPs went on to talk about weird sightings they had seen in our building. Always catching glimpses of someone short out of the corner of their eye, things going missing, or even being misplaced. We had even had a resident wake up screaming in the middle of the night, saying he saw a woman on his ceiling staring at him. When I started my shift that night, I was left with the veteran DSP. All the other DSPs had left for the night. I stayed in the kitchen cleaning up after day shift while the vet was passing meds. I heard the back door open and ran to the windows in the back hallway to look. It was Beverly. It was snowing really hard that night, so it was hard to see out, but she was in her bent-over stance being led away by something again. This time, I saw another person with her, actually holding onto her hand. A little girl with blonde hair. I yelled for the vet and we both ran outside to look for Beverly. We looked all around the building and found nothing. The vet asked if I was sure of what I saw. I swore that I had seen Beverly. I even heard the door alarm go off again. The vet suggested we go back inside and check if maybe she got back in without us noticing. When we got to her room, we both had the air escape us. We found Beverly on the floor dead. I won't go into too much detail of how she looked, but it still haunts me to this day. She was holding a photo. It was a picture of her daughter when she was little, and her daughter had long blonde hair.